Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Breaking tonight, Mitch McConnell, who has been the longest serving GOP leader in the Senate, has announced that he will step down. This coming from the Associated Press. Tonight, McConnell will step down as the Senate Republican leader in November after a record run in the job. The AP article goes on to say that Mitch McConnell, the longest serving Senate leader in history, who has maintained his power in the face of dramatic convulsions, probably accurate how they're framing that one, in the Republican Party for almost 2 decades, will step down from that position in November. McConnell, who turned 82 last week, was set to announce his decision Wednesday in the well of the Senate, a place where he looked in awe from its back benches in 1985 when he arrived, and where he grew increasingly comfortable in the front row seat afforded the party leaders. Quote, one of life's most underappreciated talents is to know when it's time to move on to life's next chapter, he said in prepared remarks obtained by the Associated Press. So I stand before you today to say that this will be my last term as Republican leader of the Senate. So a lot of Republicans, myself included, would say it is long past time for Mitch McConnell to step down. But this now begs the question, who is going to step into his role as the GOP leader of the Senate? And of course, this coming now as Speaker Mike Johnson is still less than a year into his tenure of his speakership. And he met with leaders at the White House yesterday, including a one-on-one with President Joe Biden. This is what Speaker Johnson had to say about his time with Democrat leaders.
Thank you. Thank you all for staying. We had a couple of meetings there. It was frank and honest. I think we need more frank and honest conversations on Capitol Hill. So I was happy to participate in this. We did that as a group, and then I had a one-on-one for a period of time with the president, just he and I in the Oval Office. Let me say this. When I showed up today, my purpose was to express what I believe is the obvious truth, and that is that we must take care of America's needs first. When you talk about America's needs, you have to talk first about our open border. I've been, I believe, in maybe 20-something states over the last several weeks, going around the country, appearing at events with my colleagues, and we're hearing from the American people of all parties and all persuasions in all cities and all states who feel this acutely. They understand the catastrophe at the border is affecting everyone, and it is top of mind for all the American people for that reason. So I brought that issue up repeatedly today in that room and again one-on-one with the president. I think that's our responsibility to bring that up. The other big priority for our country, of course, is the funding of our government. And we have been working in good faith around the clock every single day for months and weeks and over the last several days, quite literally around the clock, to get that job done. We're very optimistic. I hope that the other leaders came out here and told you the same. We believe that we can get to agreement on these issues and prevent a government shutdown, and that's our first responsibility. You also heard, I'm sure, that there was discussion about the supplemental spending package, and I was very clear with the president and all those in the room that the House is actively pursuing and investigating all the various options on that, and we will address that in a timely manner. But again, the first priority of the country is our border and making sure it's secure. I believe the president can take executive authority right now today to change that, and I told him that again today in person, as I've said to him many times, publicly and privately over the last several weeks. It's time for action. It is a catastrophe, and it must stop. And we will get the government funded, and we'll keep working on that. So we'll have more for you soon.
Your mind on government funding.
For more money for.
So I agree with Speaker Mike Johnson that there is an obvious truth that we need to protect America first. This should not be a complicated question, that the legitimate role of government for the United States government is to protect our interests first. But now with the stepping down of Leader McConnell, is the Senate going to be more precarious in terms of the GOP compatibility with the House in advancing America first priorities? And by America first, I don't necessarily mean just the priorities of the Trump campaign, but certainly the priorities when Donald Trump was in office. We all have to admit, whether you love or hate Trump, we were better off under the Trump administration than we are under Joe Biden. And so Speaker Mike Johnson, I think, is in a very difficult position with a tenuous and very slight Republican majority there in Congress to advance these priorities. But he is maintaining the line. He's saying very clearly to President Biden that we have to have the interests of America first. We have to close the border. All of these things essentially are not just constitutional questions, and the powers that our founders in their wisdom delegated specific limited powers to the government to operate to ensure that they're protecting the individual rights of Americans. But all of these policy decisions end up essentially being moral questions. When we look at the heinous murders that have happened at the hands of illegal aliens that have come across the border unlawfully, we see Laken Riley, that young nursing student who was brutally cut down at 22 years old. When we look at what illegal aliens are doing, that the crime in Venezuela reportedly is now at an all-time low, and yet it's at an all-time high here in America. Why? Because they're exporting their criminals to the United States, and we're doing nothing about it. So Speaker Johnson is totally correct that we need to prioritize America first. It becomes a moral question of policy when we see the effects of the negligent, unconstitutional, and un-American policies from the Biden administration. Now, I've known Speaker Mike Johnson a really long time. When I first started working for President Trump ahead of the first sham impeachment, he and I would routinely speak almost daily about the defense. He served as one of the managers of President Trump's defense. He knows what he's doing. He has the right perspective on the U.S. Constitution, on America first. And even though I know a lot of people out there are very concerned that Mike Johnson isn't necessarily doing his job, according to some of the reports, I would encourage you, give him a chance. He is a wonderful leader. He understands the priorities of America first. He understands the legitimate role of government, which is that government doesn't actually have rights. Government only has limited powers. And those powers are specifically to preserve and protect the rights of who? Not the illegal aliens that come across the border, but the rights of Americans and America first. So Speaker Mike Johnson knows what he's doing, but he's working with a very, very difficult playbook. And I hope that whoever gets into leadership with the GOP and replaces Mitch McConnell in the Senate, that they are going to have the same priorities. And that person will work with Mike Johnson in order to specifically get these priorities across the finish line. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight to make sure that we're breaking down the top trending headlines from an originalist, conservative American perspective. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Dramatic new footage is now out that's showing how heroic officers thwarted the would-be mass shooter at the Lakewood church, Joel Osteen's megachurch, several weeks ago. This is just some of the over 20 minutes of footage that has now been released on social media. This is just horrible. And some of the footage also showed a police officer who was praying over a wounded child. Joining me now is Tom Ascol, who is the president of Founders Ministry and pastor of his own church here in my home state of Florida. So, Tom, these types of targeting of churches are happening more and more frequently. And it's just so frustrating to see how churches are being targeted. And what is your reaction to this type of footage that's coming out and showing this kind of horrific scene?
Well, it's heartbreaking to think of it and to see any of those images, and your heart goes out to everyone involved, to this poor, sad individual that perpetrated this horrible offense, and to the child who I understand is still in very critical condition, certainly to that community that's associated with that congregation there in Houston. It's tragic. And these are the kinds of things that we've been hearing about increasingly over the years. And we've gone through specific training here at our own church, our men who are involved in the safety protocols here. And we've talked to law enforcement officials and others who have just said that these types of perpetrators look for soft targets, and churches are largely soft targets because we welcome people. We want to show people the hospitality of Jesus Christ, and yet we cannot afford to let our guard down. And you need sheepdogs around the congregation in order to protect the sheep. And praise God for those who are willing to step in to those responsibilities. And we saw some of them on the video of what happened there in Houston.
Yeah, and it is unfortunately so necessary now that churches do have security. But my good friend Steve Deace, who is one of the Blaze commentators on Blaze TV, had a really interesting perspective about this, saying that Joel Osteen, who's the head pastor of Lakewood Church there in Houston, Texas, was on kind of the front lines of encouraging all of the pro-LGBT legislation and the mayor there in Houston. And yet his own church was targeted because apparently you can't be woke enough for the trans community. And this shooter was part of that community, and that came out in reports afterwards. So what does that tell you as a pastor for standing firm on the truth rather than just catering to the whims of the culture?
Yeah, well, I think that is a very, very rich topic that has so many implications. One, to pastors and churches, it ought to be another wake-up call. We've received several of them over the years that you cannot compromise the truth of God. You cannot, for the sake of being winsome or thinking that somehow you're going to placate these radical people with their agendas who want to transform not just our understanding of the gospel of Jesus Christ and religion, but the whole nation and Western civilization. You cannot placate them. And if you think by being nice or agreeing with them or not telling them the truth about what God says about their perverted ideologies and lifestyles, that you will somehow gain their favor, it's just simply not true. What they need is the most loving thing that we can do for them, which is to tell them the truth that in Christ there is freedom, and in Christ there is transformation, and they don't have to live the way they've been living. They can be transformed. That's the message we have. And all of this placating, all of this attempt to try to come across like, oh, we're not like other Christians who say these things that are interpreted as being violent or mean or unloving. We want to welcome all the LGBTQ plus whatever Christians and gay Christians into our communities. Those folks have denied Jesus Christ. And not only that, but they have betrayed the gospel of Christ. And the only hope that people trapped in such false ways of living have available to them.
And what would you say to the maybe the secular agenda leftists that would say, okay, well, fine, you believe that, but don't push your beliefs on me, and certainly the law shouldn't reflect that?
Well, again, that's a very large question and subject, an important one. But this community, Joel Osteen's church, he and I disagree on just about everything that's important regarding what the Christian faith is. But nevertheless, they were not out in the community pushing their agenda. They were inside their building, their facilities, worshiping. So that's one. A second thing is that all law is moral, and it's based in some kind of moral conviction. And so the idea that, hey, don't legislate your morality on me is just false. It's not a question of whether we're going to have some type of moral conviction that is manifested in our law. The only question is which one. Are we going to have those of these radical ideologies that are kind of Johnny-come-lately to Western civilization, or are we going to have those that have given us the very freedoms, recognize those freedoms, and begin to develop public policy and political theory based and rooted in those freedoms that come from God, not from the state? That's the question, and we ought to have that conversation. I'm willing to have it with anybody, but the idea of, hey, don't push your morality on me through legislation, I say to my atheist friends, you better hope that Christian morality gets rooted more deeply and recovered in our legislation today, because that's the only hope that people like you or me have for any kind of freedom of conscience and religious liberty.
Yeah, so well said, Tom Ascol. And you're absolutely right that all law is inherently moral. It's just whose morality are we legislating? Is it objective truth from the laws of nature and of nature's God, or is it from the arbitrary whims of the culture that can change? And we're seeing that so often in the culture that as things continue to change, then our laws are changing, and what was once permissive now is being canceled. And you can't be woke enough, because even if you thought maybe back in the 1970s or the 80s or even 5 years ago something was okay, now suddenly you're canceled because that's the whim of the culture today. So this is a really rich topic. I so appreciate your commentary and also standing firm on objective truth. This is why conservatives always have to be concerned about objective moral truth in our law. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. The left continues to melt down about the Supreme Court of Alabama and the IVF opinion. And Tammy Duckworth has now suggested that women's rights are going to be totally foreclosed and that this is going to be a big issue for 2024. So let's watch this from a couple of the leftist mainstream media networks.
The stakes of the 2024 presidential election after the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos are people, imperiling the access to even participate in IVF and showing voters just how extreme Republican policies and court decisions are in a post-Roe world. Democrats have seized on this moment. NBC is reporting that, quote, Democrats from President Joe Biden on down are blaming the Alabama court's ruling that embryos are human on Trump's shaping of the U.S. Supreme Court and its subsequent overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth says she will bring her bill to protect in vitro fertilization and other fertility treatments to the Senate floor tomorrow, trying to put lawmakers on the record for where they stand on the issue. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra and Democrats argue Republicans have gone too far with restricting reproductive care. And today, the Biden administration's top health official was there in Alabama to meet with patients and doctors impacted by that controversial state Supreme Court ruling giving embryos the same rights as children. Lawmakers in the state are now scrambling to approve legislation to protect access to IVF treatments. And Alabama's Republican governor says she hopes to have a bill on her desk.
Three of the state's largest clinics have now paused IVF procedures while they analyze the decision which gave frozen embryos the same rights as children.
So is this really an extremist position? Well, Josh Hammer, who is an editor at Newsweek, had this in his opinion piece in Newsweek. Alabama Supreme Court's embryo ruling embodies America's legal heritage. And so Josh Hammer joins me now. So Josh, this isn't a theocracy. We're not trying to establish anything beyond America's basic legal tradition.
Yeah. So, Jenna, thanks as always for having me. So there is so much misinformation and disinformation when it comes to the Alabama Supreme Court's ruling in the LePage case that it's frankly difficult to know where to start. But I guess we'll start with the facts of the case because not many people are actually talking about the facts and how this legal issue actually got to the Supreme Court. So let's go ahead and start there. So basically what happened was you had one of the largest fertility clinics in the state of Alabama located in a hospital, I believe, in the state capital of Montgomery. And apparently, inexplicably, this fertility clinic didn't secure its facility. Like they literally didn't lock the doors. And you had a patient wander, stumble into the fertility clinic. Maybe it was a drunken stupor. I don't really know. A little bizarre. And the patient is in there and is trying to see the embryos. But this is a cryogenic nursery. So there's sub-zero temperatures. So he goes to pull out the tray of embryos and he goes, my God, it's sub-zeros. And he drops it and the embryos shatter and they are killed. So the legal question is the parents, the biological parents of a couple of those embryos, the embryonic parents, then filed a tort claim against the fertility clinic under Alabama's wrongful death of a minor statute. It is a law that pretty much every state has on the books. Wrongful death of a minor goes back in Alabama to 1872. It's been amended a few times there. And the specific legal question that was teed up for the Alabama Supreme Court was whether the embryos here were, quote unquote, minor children under the meanings of Alabama's wrongful death of a minor statute. Now, Jenna, here is one of the key parts that virtually no one out there, let alone the mainstream media, is reporting. Alabama had previously held in a long, uninterrupted line of cases that unborn children at any gestational age are minor children for purposes of the wrongful death of a minor statute. Let me say that again. Unborn children were indisputably and are minor children under Alabama case law for this statute. And more to the point, neither party, including the fertility clinic, actually challenged that understanding. It wasn't presented to the court. No one was contesting it. So the only question that Justice Jay Mitchell was dealing with in his very straightforward case of statutory interpretation, it's a very simple legal opinion, frankly, was whether he should legislate from the bench and create an exception whereby embryos outside of the womb are treated differently than embryos inside of the womb for purposes of the wrongful death of a minor statute. That is the kind of thing that if the Alabama legislature wants to make clear, they can go ahead and legislate that. But from a judicial perspective, the court was given no reason whatsoever to read that exception in via judicial fiat. There was simply no reason for them to do so. It would have been the very judicial activism that the right typically decries against the left when it comes from the left there. So it's actually a very straightforward case of statutory interpretation. It flows very nicely from Alabama case law. And, more to the point, Jenna, to kind of wade into what's actually happening here with the fertility clinic, From my perspective, a lot of people are freaking out here. Oh my God, they're going to shut down IVF in the state of Alabama. Look, if you are putting a lot of money, IVF is not cheap. This thing costs a lot of money. It's a very expensive and cumbersome and at times invasive procedure. I have not done it myself, but I know friends who have. If you're going to work with a fertility clinic when it comes to IVF, don't you want the fertility clinic to be incentivized to not carelessly and negligently treat their trays of embryos? By putting the fertility clinics on watch that they could possibly be sued if they negligently handle embryos under this statute, it's actually going to have the effect of incentivizing greater care. It's going to make the fertility clinics more on guard. It will improve their behavior, and it will actually reassure parents who are going down this very expensive rabbit hole of trying to be parents and get the beautiful gift of life. It's only going to incentivize them as well to feel a little bit better in their business dealings with the clinics. So it's a win all around. Now, the legislature is going to pass something. They're going to pass some sort of bill. Donald Trump has called for it. The governor of Alabama has called for it there. But as of now, to say that this is, frankly, from my perspective, not a big deal is an understatement. It's really not a big deal. It's actually a very legally straightforward case.
Yeah, but of course, Josh Hammer, that straightforward explanation isn't what the left wants to hear. They want to create this hysteria. The clip from Good Morning America suggested that, this woman who now has cancer, of course they find the person with cancer, right? To say that now she has to put her dreams of children on hold because of the IVF opinion. I mean, this is trying to paint this decision as leftist or as extremism from the right, when really it's leftist extremism that's misinterpreting the point here.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, Jenna, when we're dealing here with radical pro-abortion actors, with leftist militants who hate unborn life. I mean, if there is one great pagan sacrament that the left has, it is their hatred, their vitriol, their disdain for unborn life. I mean, frankly, their hatred of humanity in general. I mean, how else to look at the radical global warming environmentalist perspective? They are literally vowing to have fewer children if they're going to have children at all, because they don't want to burden the planet with more people who are going to take in oxygen and spew out carbon dioxide. It's all a misanthropic, anti-human perspective. Yeah. That's what's really going on here.
It is. And we're going to have to leave it there, Josh Hammer. I mean, this is the left trying to just commoditize children. And rather than having a straightforward legal opinion, they always want to legislate from the bench instead of go with originalism. We'll be right back with more. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. As the world continues to watch the atrocities going on in Israel and the conflict with Hamas and Palestine, we are celebrating the 75th year of Israel regaining sovereignty. And my next guest, Jonathan Feldstein, has a brand new book that is titled Israel the Miracle. He is the president of the Genesis 123 Foundation. And this book, Jonathan, is such an amazing compilation of stories of Christians and Americans who have gone over to Israel and understand the rich history and why America is supportive of Israel, and especially in these moments with the October 7th conflict and beyond.
Yeah, first of all, Jenna, thank you. It's really a delight to be with you. The book was conceived and printed before the war came off the presses in Israel 2 weeks before. We didn't plan on a war. We just planned on having a book with 75 essays celebrating the miracle of Israel after 75 years of restoring independence, of Jewish sovereignty. But now the book, I have to tell you, is so much more meaningful. In the production process, Pat Robertson died. We moved his essay up to the front. People are referring to that as his last testament on Israel. And you mentioned specifically about America, and I'm sure you know, if not personally, you know who David Barton is, America's historian. So he's got one of also the best essays adorned with American and Israeli flags about exactly why the founding fathers, before there was a state of Israel, why the founding fathers and American history are so deeply intertwined with Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah, and this book is incredible, and you can find it at israelthemiracle.com and get your copy there. And you're absolutely right that our Judeo-Christian heritage and the history of America, understanding that we support and share the same divine lawgiver in the God of the Bible, and that we understand as Americans and as the United States why it's so important to consider Israel one of our highest key allies. And I think that this has been shown, especially through the support of the United States in terms of Christians, maybe not so much our current sitting president, unfortunately, but at least the Christians that you mentioned, Pat Robertson, Ben Carson has an essay, former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. I mean, so many of these wonderful Christian conservatives that have essays in this book, why America supports Israel. So as someone who is Jewish yourself, why is it so meaningful for the United States to support Israel to the Jewish people?
Wow, thank you. That's an important question. You know, I think most Israelis know that there's support, but don't feel it on a day-to-day basis. And especially now, and I hear it from soldiers that I've been visiting on both fronts, on the Gaza border, my son-in-law, and who know, but also up on the Lebanese border. We're feeling very alone. We're feeling very beleaguered. We're feeling like it's the whole world against Israel. And it's not just Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, but it's really the whole world. So having that support, and this beautiful book is a depiction of it, but the spirit, the heart that's behind it is so powerful, and it's getting really, really positive receptions among Christians, which it should be. It's 75 essays by 75 Christian leaders from all over the world. But Jews in America and Israel, around the world, are really embracing this because they're seeing the heart. And it's not just the throwaway phrases, bless Israel and I will bless you, or be a watchman on the wall, but there's really deep, sincere relationship that's depicted in these essays.
Yeah. And Jonathan, I think so often, especially for conservatives in America, we tend to view the conflict with Israel and even the United States and Israel being allies through a specifically political lens and a policy lens. And we sometimes forget the heart and soul that goes into, as you mentioned, these relationships. And your foundation, the Genesis 123 Foundation, is trying to foster those relationships. And so talk about that a little bit and how this organization really strives to make this all about the people, not just the policy.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a long story, but back in the late 80s is where God called me to be a bridge between Jews and Christians. And it was the first time I was ever in a church in Cleveland, Tennessee. And that's a different story for another time. But what's so important is that building of bridges, is the building of relationships. And I had been working in various sectors along the decades, and only several years ago when we started the Genesis 123 Foundation, our purpose is to build bridges, two ways, so Jews and Christians can relate to one another, get to know one another, explore the differences, and they're not insignificant, but the things that we have in common are that much more significant, and there are so many more of those. And that's really our heart. We want to create relationships in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. And thank God. And anyone can go visit Genesis123.co for information about the book as well, but all the projects that we do that are these relationship building projects.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful. I had the opportunity to visit Israel years ago. It's been almost 10 years, I think, with my cousin. And I'll never forget that our tour guide said something so profound, it has stuck with me, that he said to Christians who read the New Testament, who read the Old Testament, and who know these places in Israel just from reading the Bible, he said, you've read in black and white, but after this week, now you'll read in color. And it's been so true because since the time that I spent in Israel and seeing seeing where Jesus walked, seeing all of these historical sites, and the reality that this isn't just a story in the Bible, it's truth and it's history. And seeing all of that for myself really brought home what I was reading in scripture, and it brought it alive. And so for anyone maybe who's considering coming to Israel, what does it mean to the Jewish people to have Americans who come and who like, President Trump came and then opened the embassy back in Jerusalem, which was a really historic thing for the United States. And I fully supported him in that. But to have that kind of support and these types of, frankly, pilgrimages from Americans to Israel.
It means so much. And pilgrimages, I always encourage people not just to be on and off a tour bus, but to really get to know us. When I'm at home right now, you're catching me in Michigan, but when I'm at home, we always host people in our homes, often for Shabbat. When I hear of a tour group coming to Israel and they're in Jerusalem in a hotel on Friday night, I said, oh, no, that's not good enough. You need to be in a Jewish home experiencing Shabbat. And that's often the highlight of many of the Christian tours. And it means a lot anyway. I just had a meeting with Israel's tourism minister, who has a lovely letter in the introduction of the book. And we were talking about how it's really urgent. It's very safe. We're in the middle of a war, but it's very safe. And Christians should come back and they'll feel part of us. And we're feeling especially beleaguered in Israel right now. And seeing tourists back.
And we'll continue to pray for you. And Jonathan Feldstein, the book is Israel, the Miracle. We'll be right back with more. And finally tonight, as conservatives are still engaging in the culture wars, especially in institutions like higher education, this clip has surfaced from a video that Davidson College in North Carolina is reportedly requiring its students and the first-year students to watch. And this is all about their view of racism. Watch this.
Really, up to this point, we've kind of hinted at, but have we really talked about racism?
Not really.
When we talk about racism in this country, we usually talk about it in two different ways. And it's important to distinguish. We talk about individual meanness as the first way. Meanness, hate, and then we have another idea of how we interpret it. We talk about collective power, groups enacting policies, discrimination, segregation. But most of us, especially in the white community, go with the first interpretation, individual meanness.
You kind of hear a lot, like, especially in the media, like, I'm not racist. Like, I have friends that are black or whatever, and they think that they're not racist because of that.
Yeah. So that's a great example. So if we diagnose racism as individual meanness, the way we're going to treat it is by making sure everyone's nice to each other. But if we diagnose it as collective power, then we got something else to do to treat it. This is the People's Institute definition of racism, and we're not the only folks that use it. There's lots of different organizations in the country that use this. So we're just going to break this down. It seems pretty simple, right? The last part of that equation, what is power? Power is the legitimate and collective control or access to those systems sanctioned by the state. And we mean the state, we mean the country. Racism is the misuse of power in three ways. It hurts and controls people of color. It helps white people. And it's designed to make everyone go along with a racial construct. And which one do you think is most important out of these three? Of which one was racism set up to do?
To help white people.
Help white people. That's all it is. The fact that it hurts and controls people of color, that's just an effect.
Ryan Helfenbein is the Vice President of Communications at Liberty University and the Executive Director of the Standing for Freedom Center. And Ryan, this video goes on, the clip that I saw on social media, for another 5 minutes. And this is just indoctrinating first-year college students into this systems view that racism is implicitly systemic in America. And the entire point of this is truly discrimination against white people and dividing between the color of our skin. It's horrific in my view.
No, that's absolutely right. You watch this and it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I do have to comment on the fact that it's most obvious to me that the facilitator in undoing racism is actually white. That's ironic because at the end of this video, this 5-minute clip, one of the students actually asked the facilitator, "Are you saying that all white people are racist?" And he says, "Yes." So that would obviously include him. But what is he really saying? What is he really getting at? He's talking about collective power. He's talking about Marxism from the standpoint of oppressor categories and those that are oppressed. So not individual meanness. That's his characterization. By the way, there are many hate crimes committed in the name of bigotry and racism. And by the way, it includes ending people's lives. You look at the protests back during Black Lives Matter, there were over 10 people that lost their lives in the name of social protest. And that was all called speech at that time. Remember that? And so, you know, when he's talking about the institutions that are being controlled, what are those institutions right now? Right now, if you look around in society, if you look at education, if you look at Hollywood and entertainment, if you look at Wall Street, right now it seems as though the woke control a major part of our economy. So who is really in the oppressor class? Who has collective power? It's people that are propagating this kind of ideology that is so dangerous and diabolical to American freedom. And so they're warping young minds. And I'll just say this, Jenna, you know, this goes back to critical pedagogy. Don Paulo Ferreira back in the 1960s, that basically the whole purpose behind education for Marxists is political literacy. So the idea is to take students, young minds, apt pupils, and to carry them forward and make them critically conscious of oppressor and oppress, and basically to indoctrinate them so that they become foot soldiers for a cultural revolution. That's exactly what's happening at Davidson College.
And you're so right, Ryan Helfenbein, that this is all about Marxism with the oppressor and the oppressed. And they're trying to take this message to students who are coming into the university and set them up for this type of Marxist indoctrination and this type of regime that's built on supposedly systemic racism that has to be ousted. So how do you at Liberty University and other universities that are centered on truth combat this type of ideology and confront it?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to win education. Education is so critically important. Gone are the days of a value neutral classroom. The idea that you just kind of go into a secular classroom and, you know, a religious ideology and sectarianism is not being promoted. And so, you know, we generally promote the freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, religious liberty, that kind of thing. And it's just all value neutral. Nowadays, ideology is everywhere. You look at the sexual revolution in most classrooms, it's all about taking kids at a very young age and hypersexualizing them. And then you think about the transition that's taking place in some schools where they're encouraging kids to trans at a very, very early age. So you have to win on education. You need educational freedom and parental rights. You have to start young, K through 12. It's critical that we get this right. The other two institutions so critical to American freedom are the church and the family. It's a three-legged stool: education, church, and family. That is the key to winning on the culture wars.
Yeah, so well said. And those are the three institutions that Marxism is targeting, which are, the institutions' education. They do want those foot soldiers. They're targeting the traditional family. And of course, they're targeting to try to take over the church and go into the church and infiltrate and basically neuter the church from standing up and speaking truth. So Ryan Helfenbein, appreciate what you do at Liberty University and teaching students truth. So that's all the time that we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. Thanks so much for joining us on this first week. We're going to start a mailbag for Fridays, so you can always reach me with your comments, your questions, Jenna@SalemNewsChannel.com.